Hello, my little subjects. Heather Blossom here, and you ever think back to Hell of a Boss's first episode of Season 1? Lately, I've been thinking back to Mrs. Mayberry. Anyone else think it's weird that we only know her as Mrs. Mayberry? No one called her anything but Mrs. Mayberry, Tits, or Crazy Bitch. The fuck is your name, ho? The only thing that has defined her is her failed marriage, which is serviceable to the plot, especially for a side character at the beginning of the series. But let's revisit her, shall we? When thinking of Mrs. Mayberry, the first thing that may come to mind are thoughts of pity, of sympathy, of righteous indignation. The way her story plays out, we are meant to root for her, and why shouldn't we? She was a wonderful teacher, an attentive wife, an overall valued member of the community. How dare fate deal her such a tragic hand? After all, she didn't do anything to deserve winding up in hell, right?
Right.
Oh please, the backstory we see play out is purely Mayberry's perspective, and going off that musical number, highly embellished. By her own admission, she did not hesitate to turn to violence first and reason last. Decent people typically don't do that. Not exactly the kind of person you want taking care of your kids. Speaking of the kids, I want to take a moment to address this one. You know what kind of hat he's wearing? A dunce hat. A dunce hat, for those of you who may be unaware, is part of a Victorian-era punishment based off shame. It was reserved for disruptive students and slow learners. I shouldn't need to explain that shaming children for not grasping their academics quick enough is a crappy thing to do. It's emotional abuse. You could argue that he was probably the class clown and being disruptive, but my point still stands. It's emotional abuse! Now, the kid in the hat seems down with it, showing he either doesn't care or is used to it, and I'm leaning toward the latter because he gets put in that corner at the beginning of class. My mans didn't even do anything yet. Even if he was a known troublemaker, you don't just punish a kid for showing up. This, and based off the fact the kids seem more than happy to rejoice in Martha's presence and Mayberry's absence, tells me that she was not nearly the picture-perfect professor she claimed to be. It may also be very telling to note that not a single living soul came to her defense after her passing. Martha was the hero and Mayberry the crazy bitch that shot her. We could speculate that maybe Martha twisted the story, made it look like she wasn't a mistress but just someone caught in the crossfire of a domestic squabble. Except we have a half dozen little witnesses to the event and a Zoom call capturing it all. That's hard to lie about, but maybe she didn't have to. With Mrs. Mayberry seeming to have few friends and being a teacher who implements punishments that have been deemed deplorable since the last century, my guess is she wasn't too popular. That would leave only one person in her life that she depended on, her husband, Gerald. But how well did she even treat this man? Don't get me wrong, cheating is never excusable. I mean, neither is murder, but I digress. From the awkward banter this guy lets out during, it leads me to believe it's his first foray into extramarital activities. So then why would he do this to poor Mrs. Mayberry? Was Martha just that hot? That's a debate on its own. I mean, guy clearly has a thing for blondes. According to my research, cheating most often occurs in marriages due to sexual incompatibility, emotional neglect, self-esteem issues, or sometimes even just plain boredom. It's hard to put a finger on exactly what might have been the cause in this case. He sounds like an awkward guy, so self-esteem seems feasible, but I can't help but think what caused such a stir during Mayberry's opening number.
And it's your husband's birthday!
She forgot her husband's birthday, which, depending on the person, can be forgivable, but she had such a horrified reaction to the realization. It makes me think that this is either the first time or one of multiple times she has forgotten an important date. Not to mention her retort to Gerald's horrified exclamation while she was assaulting a woman with a family.
We could have had a family!
That is so much to unpackage. Were they trying for a kid and he broke up their family before it could begin? Or had she been pressuring him for a child, which caused the initial friction leading to adultery? Or maybe it was a previously unvoiced desire she had that she never communicated due to the relationship's instability. It doesn't look good, folks. This woman, at every turn, tried to frame herself as the innocent party, but the more we examine her own story and the aftermath, the more it becomes clear that she unwittingly orchestrated her own downfall. Being a vindictive teacher, a persona non grata amongst her peers, and a poor life partner to boot, I have a hard time imagining how else her life would have played out. Now, don't get me wrong, she is not nearly as bad a person as, say, Martha or any member of her cannibalistic family. There's being a crappy person and being a monster. Know the difference. Because you can live with one and be eaten by the other. But at the end of the day, I think Mayberry is exactly where she was meant to be. Murder or not. I'm Heather Blossom, and it's been a hell of a time.